I should have known something was wrong the moment my phone buzzed that morning. It was Michael, my son's wedding photographer, and his voice on the other end sounded so frantic I almost dropped the mug I was rinsing. He never called me, especially not before noon. "Sarah, you need to come to the studio. Now, please." That's all he could say before hanging up. My hands were damp with nerves as I shuffled into the hallway, keys rattling in my palm. The walk to Michael's studio felt endless. Every step seemed heavier than the last. I kept thinking, what could possibly be so urgent? Did something happen to Jake? Was Emma all right? My heart skittered in my chest, the same way it had when Jake was a little boy and someone called from the school office. When I reached the studio, Michael looked pale, almost sick. He didn't bother with hello. He just pointed toward the old leather sofa and said, "Please, Mrs. Thompson, just sit." The air inside smelled faintly of coffee grounds and dust, like the corners of my own kitchen. For a second, I almost laughed at how normal it felt, until Michael rolled the footage. It was quiet except for the mechanical whir of his computer. The screen showed Jake and Emma beaming, holding hands, exchanging vows. Memories I cherished. But then, a subtle change. Michael's voice wavered. "Watch here," he whispered, tapping the screen. I leaned in, clutching my purse so tight I felt my fingers ache. On the footage, beyond the laughter, past the clinking glasses, there was a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Emma, her smile fading, leaned close to Jake. "She'll never know," she whispered, her eyes darting around the room. "We have to get the papers signed before she figures it out." Jake's voice was low, bitter. "Just keep her quiet. It'll all be ours." The words echoed, amplified by the silence in the studio. I stared at their faces, searching for the children I thought I knew. Time froze. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I tried to remember how to breathe. Was this a mistake? Maybe Michael got the timeline wrong. Maybe it was a joke, an inside thing I just didn't understand. But Michael's face was solemn, almost apologetic. He told me quietly, "There's more." I didn't know who else to turn to. He hesitated before glancing at me, eyes searching for trust. I caught them talking again. "Later, after the ceremony, about you, about your house, your accounts. It sounded planned." Somewhere deep inside, I wanted to deny it, to pretend I misunderstood. Instead, I asked, my voice trembling, "Why would my own son?" Michael just shrugged, regretful. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson. I thought you needed to know." My memories cracked with every image on the screen. I replayed the way Jake hugged me that night, how Emma complimented my old pearl earrings, how I trusted them both. The betrayal was a physical ache, sharp and sudden, like something inside me had snapped. Have you ever learned a secret that shattered you? Have you ever looked at your own child and wondered if you ever knew them at all? I sat there for another moment, staring at a paused image of Jake and Emma toasting their future. My future, at risk, like one of those glasses slipping over the edge of the table, about to crash. And as the tears threatened, I realized trusting someone isn't the same as knowing them. I wished someone had warned me, but to understand what I did next, I need to take you back to where this all began. If you've ever lost someone you loved, you'll understand the strange stillness that takes over a house after a funeral. That was my world when Harold died. The nights felt bottomless, filled with echoes of conversations we never finished. I slipped into a quiet routine, early mornings making oatmeal for one, afternoons weeding the flower beds alone, evenings lit by the blue glow of the TV, pretending it was enough. Sometimes I'd call Jake just to hear his voice. He'd answer, "Hey Mom, everything okay?" And I'd say, "Of course, sweetheart, just checking on you." We both did our best to sound cheerful. Maybe we were both pretending. Jake had always been my boy, my only child. He was the kind who'd call every Sunday, even as a grown man, just to tell me a new joke he'd heard from a friend at work. Our tradition never changed, no matter how busy he was. When he met Emma, I remember feeling both relieved and left behind. She was so lovely, tall, dark hair, perfect posture, a quick, bright laugh that filled every corner of a room. The first time they came for dinner after their wedding, she brought me a loaf of homemade banana bread. She wrapped it carefully in a blue towel and pressed it into my hands with a smile. "It's an old family recipe," she said, "only for special people." I wanted to believe her. The truth is, after Harold died, I was lonely in a way that's hard to describe. My world got smaller. Jake and Emma became my anchor, my reason to keep going. I clung to their visits, their phone calls, their invitations to Sunday lunches. Sometimes I wondered if I was too eager, always offering to help, always asking if they wanted leftovers to take home. Looking back, I suppose there were signs, little things at first. A misplaced bank statement, a voicemail from the insurance company I didn't remember requesting. I wanted to believe they were accidents. One afternoon, Emma arrived before Jake, her hair pulled back tight and her smile brighter than usual. She handed me a stack of papers. "Jake says you need to sign these for the life insurance adjustment," she explained. I hesitated, turning over the first page slowly, pretending to read. Numbers danced on the lines, but meant nothing to me. My heart thudded. "Is this really necessary?" I asked. Emma just laughed, a little too high, a little too forced. "Of course, it's just paperwork, Sarah. You know how these things are." But I noticed her eyes didn't quite meet mine. A week later, I found Jake in the den, sorting through my filing cabinet. The sunlight made stripes on his back, and for a split second, he looked like a teenager again, searching for the car keys before prom. He didn't realize I was watching him. When he finally noticed, he smiled, hands already full of envelopes. "Looking for that investment statement you said you lost, Mom," he said. I thought I'd help out. Something brittle in his voice made me pause. Jake was never interested in my finances before. Maybe you felt that nagging sensation. Something isn't right, but you can't prove it. I started second-guessing myself. I found checkbook stubs missing, reminders for bills I'd already paid. I told myself, "Sarah, you're getting older. Don't be paranoid." But the feeling of unease grew. Emma mentioned, offhand, that maybe it was time for me to give her power of attorney, just so things would be easier if anything happened. She made it sound like a kindness. I remember nodding, but inside, I felt cold. There were moments I tried to brush it off. Emma's sweet smile, Jake dropping by with pizza on a rainy Thursday, laughter around the table. I'd tell myself, they love you. They're just worried. But sometimes when I caught them exchanging glances, a shiver ran up my spine. It was the look of conspirators, not family. The loneliness pressed in heavier after that. I tried to stay busy, painting the bathroom, volunteering at the library, joining a knitting group at the community center. But every empty room reminded me of what I'd lost, and every visit from Jake and Emma felt rehearsed, urgent, as if they were there on assignment. The final straw came one Sunday. I'd made Jake's favorite, chicken and dumplings, and set the table with Harold's old blue china. They ate quickly, barely tasting the food. Emma kept glancing at her phone under the table. Jake excused himself twice to take calls in the hallway. When they left, the house felt colder than it ever had before. I washed the dishes slowly, my hands trembling, and found a folded sheet of paper tucked into the stack of mail by the door. It was a legal form, practically blank except for my name, typed neatly at the top, and a space for a signature. The line for power of attorney stood out, stark and final. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, staring at that paper, wondering if I was losing my mind. Maybe you've questioned your own judgment before, wondered if grief was clouding your thinking, if loneliness was twisting your perspective. I wanted to believe I was just being foolish. But then, that night, I caught Emma whispering into her phone on the porch. I could only hear one side, but her tone was sharp, impatient. "No, she hasn't signed it yet. I'm working on it," she hissed. "He said he'd get her to do it next time, but she's being stubborn." I held my breath, afraid to move, feeling my heart race with dread. When she came back inside, her smile was back, bright as ever. "Everything all right?" I asked, voice trembling. She squeezed my arm a little too hard. "Of course, Sarah. Why wouldn't things be all right?" The world seemed to tilt then. Suddenly, every accident, every odd request, every offhand remark landed like a blow. I couldn't deny it any longer. I started to keep my doors locked, even during the day. I changed passwords on my accounts, moved my savings to another bank without telling anyone. Each small act of independence felt both rebellious and necessary. A lifeline thrown to myself. Margaret, my neighbor, noticed the change in me. One afternoon, as we tended her roses, she asked, careful and gentle, "Are you all right, honey? You look about as raw as my thumb after a day with these thorns." I almost told her everything, but the words caught in my throat. Just tired, Margaret, just tired. She patted my hand, but her eyes were sharp. If you need anything, you know where to find me. A mother knows when something isn't right. I wish I'd been brave enough to confide in her then, but I was still hoping I was wrong, that Jake and Emma really just wanted to help, that their concern was genuine, not a mask for something colder. But denial couldn't last. The following week, I got a call from my lawyer, Robert. He said, "Sarah, I received some paperwork from Jake and Emma, documents transferring your house to their names. Did you approve this, or is there some kind of mistake?" I remember gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. "No, I did not approve anything," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Robert hesitated. Then, "I thought so. I'll put a stop to it for now, but you need to be careful." That was the moment everything shuddered into focus. The pit in my stomach hardened into certainty. I realized I was the only one who could protect myself. Have you ever had that sinking feeling? Like you're standing in your own home, but suddenly nothing feels safe. If someone had told me my biggest threat would come from inside my own family, I'd have laughed, but I couldn't ignore the evidence anymore. I decided then, quietly, stubbornly, to watch, to listen, to collect everything I could. Because I needed to know the truth. I needed to know how deep the betrayal went. And that's where my real fight began. If you've ever doubted your own mind, you'll understand the strange vigilance that settles in after the first real betrayal. I stopped sleeping well. Nights blurred into anxious mornings. My ears strained for every sound. The click of the mailbox, footsteps on the porch, my own worried sighs echoing off the kitchen tiles. But uncertainty couldn't protect me anymore. I needed answers. I started with the little things. I made a habit of keeping my purse zipped and hidden. Each evening, I checked the doors twice. I wrote down every casual request Jake or Emma made regarding finances, their hints about gifts, their papers for me to sign. The list grew fast enough to frighten me. One morning, I found another bank slip stuffed inside the living room armchair, a deposit I hadn't made, in an account I didn't recognize. My handwriting was on the line, but the signature didn't look quite like mine. That day, I bought a little spiral notebook, pink, with daisies, like the ones I used to keep when Jake was in grade school. I wrote down every odd interaction, every misplaced item. My paranoia log, I called it, though by then I was sure it was more a survival manual. I began talking more with Margaret, my neighbor. I never spoke openly, but I started sharing my schedule with her, texting whenever Jake or Emma announced a visit. "Just checking in," she'd reply, always with a sunflower emoji. Margaret was sharper than she let on. She used to be an investigator for the local council before arthritis slowed her down. One afternoon over coffee, I asked gently, "Margaret, did you ever follow your gut, even when others told you not to?" She eyed me over her mug and said, "Honey, your gut is all you've got after 60. Ignore it at your peril." Sometimes, after they left, Margaret would come over and help me check my mail for signs of tampering. It was almost a game, looking for things that didn't add up. She taught me how to set a pinch of tape over my mailbox that would break if someone opened it. The first time the tape was broken, when no letter inside was for me, my hands didn't shake. I just wrote it down. But things escalated. Jake's tone changed. He grew impatient, abrupt. Emma started blaming me for forgetting conversations I was sure we'd never had. My doctor called one morning. "I was told you wanted a full evaluation for memory loss, Sarah. Is that correct?" I knew instantly. That was Emma's voice behind the request. "No, doctor," I said, mustering authority I hadn't used in years. "I'm of sound mind, and if further requests come, please call me directly." I hung up, oddly proud of myself for drawing a line. But the threats grew bolder. One Saturday, Emma arrived with pastries, her words as sweet as the cream inside. "Sarah, let's talk about your insurance. It's complicated these days, and you need someone you trust to help manage things." Her smile faltered when I said, "I'm fine. I keep detailed records." "Of course you do," she laughed. But I saw the flicker in her eyes. Behind each act of care was a calculation. I watched her scan the kitchen, her gaze lingering on the file drawer. Jake called nightly, asking for account details, his concern pressing at the borders of aggression. "Why won't you just tell me your PIN, Mom? What if you need help in an emergency? I kept telling him, if there's an emergency, you'll be the first call, but for now, let's let things be. I heard him sigh, annoyed, before hanging up. Margaret, never one for subtlety, said, "They're circling, aren't they?" The next week, she presented me with a voice recorder, one of those pocket-sized silver rectangles. "You leave this on, honey, whenever you're in a room with them," she said, "just in case." I felt ridiculous at first, but I tucked it under my cardigan, aware that safety often means being a little paranoid. It didn't take long for Margaret's caution to pay off. Emma and Jake arrived one Wednesday with a gift, a framed family photo, artfully arranged to cover the living room wall. Emma chatted brightly while Jake hung the picture. As I admired the frame, I noticed Emma's reflection in the glass, peering at the mail pile under the lamp, her hand slipping a letter into her bag. I made a note. Later that night, I played back the recorder. Their voices bled from my speakers, hushed but clear. "We need to move faster," Emma hissed. "Margaret is suspicious." Jake replied, "She's just a nosy old bat. Mom won't believe her. The sooner we get her to sign—" My own name sounded foreign in their mouths. That was when I knew this wasn't mere greed. This was an operation. Every visit had a purpose. Every gift was a probe. Determined, I called my bank manager and arranged a meeting, just the two of us, off the record. I asked, "Can you show me all recent activity? Anything Jake or Emma accessed?" The manager, Mr. Holloway, frowned. "Certainly, Mrs. Thompson. But your son and daughter-in-law have called often, asking about your balance and suggesting you were ill. I didn't grant access, of course, but—" He trailed off, uneasy. I thanked him and instructed, "If anyone calls on my behalf, ask for the code word, sunflower. Only Margaret and I knew it." He smiled. "That's a good system. I'll note it." Each defensive step made me bolder. I started locking all documents in an old bread box, hidden in the laundry room, behind the detergent. Margaret helped me memorize key account passwords, even wrote them in a code that only I could decode. When I stumbled, she'd wink, say, "You've still got it, Sarah." It wasn't long before Jake and Emma grew frustrated. Their smiles grew sharper, questions more pointed. "Are you sure you're taking your medication, Mom? Do you remember where you put the house deed? You have to stop worrying. It's not healthy." Their words dripped with concern, but their eyes revealed only calculation. But the moment that sealed my resolve happened late one Thursday. I couldn't sleep, so I tiptoed to the den to review my log. As I passed the spare room, I heard voices. Emma on the phone, her words edged with exasperation. "She's not making it easy. I don't care how old she is, she's stubborn. Robert says we need the documents by next month, or the transfer's delayed. Tell him not to worry. I'll get the signature." My legs trembled under me, but I stayed silent, slipping back to my room. Days blurred as I built my fortress of evidence. Margaret and I scoured old documents, organizing bills and legal letters in plastic bins by date. I installed a cheap security camera, nothing fancy, just enough to catch suspicious comings and goings. I took my new folder of evidence to Robert, the family lawyer. I wanted to believe he was still on my side. "Robert, I'm worried," I began. He regarded me over his gold-rimmed glasses, too calm. "Your son and Emma have my full support, Sarah. They said you've been forgetful, that you asked for help handling the house and your affairs." His words made my blood chill. "I never asked for that." "And here's proof," I replied, hands trembling as I spread out logs, documents, the minutes of each suspicious encounter, dates, times, Emma's requests in her own handwriting, bank slips with forged signatures. I watched him mask his surprise quickly, clearing his throat. "This is quite a list," he said tightly. "I'll have to review everything." I pressed him. "And while you do, I will not sign, transfer, or agree to anything. Understood?" He nodded, wary, as I gathered my things. The deception was wider than I feared. Jake and Emma had drawn up a timeline for moving me into an assisted living home, had convinced Robert I was incapable while preparing to sell my house behind my back. The betrayal was documented in their emails, which I later discovered carelessly printed in an old box Jake had forgotten in the garage, printed exchanges with listing agents, arguments over money I never agreed to spend. Emma's suggestion that, after Mom's birthday, we start making her think she's losing it. Fury replaced fear. I copied every scrap. With Margaret's help, I organized everything: phone calls, overheard conversations, dates, even my doctor's call log. I called my own physician and insisted on a cognitive evaluation. "I want the results in writing," I said. Dr. Price was patient and supportive. "If that makes you feel safe, Sarah, I'll be glad to." The test came back perfect, and I kept a copy in my file. Despite mounting proof, the gaslighting escalated. Jake called the neighbors, warning them I was having a tough time. Emma sent group texts to relatives, hinting I was confused. I heard whispers at church, saw the sideways glances at the grocery store. But I kept gathering, documenting, recording every slight. Some nights I doubted myself. Maybe hope made me too ruthless. But what choice did I have? Wasn't I worth fighting for? One afternoon, Margaret insisted I go for a walk while she tidied up. When I returned, she handed me a USB flash drive. "You'll want to hear this," she said, eyes fierce with loyalty. I sat on the edge of my bed, pressed play on my laptop, and listened as Jake and Emma, caught in Margaret's house through the thin walls, debated moving up their plan. "If she won't sign willingly, we get Robert to prepare a guardianship order," Jake said, voice cold. My heart ached at his certainty. "Let's push for more doctor's visits, get meds switched. She won't know what's happening." I called Robert the next day, a new strength in my voice. "I want to record our meetings from now on," I said. He bristled, but agreed. Behind the mask, I saw his fear. I spent the next week contacting every institution, banks, doctors, even the water company, and changed every password, set up voice identification, and demanded written confirmation for any transfer. Some found me fussy, but those who had loved, truly loved, understood the necessity. Jake arrived that weekend, blustering. "Why all the changes, Mom?" he asked. "You're making everything complicated." My jaw set. "Safety isn't always convenient, Jake. This is my life, and I'm going to live it." Emma rolled her eyes, muttering about old people and their stubbornness. I never stopped, couldn't stop, because I knew each day brought them closer to crossing a line I could never walk back. Some nights, I asked myself, how had love gotten me here? How had the child I'd nurtured become this ruthless stranger? What would you do if the person you trusted most tried to destroy the life you built? But by then, I'd given up hope that confrontation alone would save me. I had built a solid case, fortified by Margaret's witness and piles of evidence. The final piece slid into place one gray morning. The call from the wedding photographer, Michael, asking me to come urgently. In his shaky voice, I heard the last thread of my family unraveling. That was when I knew the game had changed, but I was ready for whatever came next. After Michael's call, my world shifted from dread to strategy. The evidence was no longer just a theory in my mind or scribbled in the pages of my pink notebook. It was real, tangible, visceral shocks of betrayal recorded and catalogued. Margaret became my confidant in all things. If you've ever woken up one morning and realized you'd been at war without knowing it, you'll know exactly what I mean. I couldn't let on, though. The trap wouldn't work unless Jake and Emma believed I was weakening, finally surrendering to their pressure. So I started acting a little confused, just enough to ease their suspicions. I let Emma explain things to me twice, smiled, and nodded at Jake's repeated instructions. "It's all so much," I'd say. "I'm glad you're both here to help me." Inside, though, I felt steel. The mother in me grieved, but the woman who'd survived Harold's passing, who'd rebuilt her world alone, had found her backbone. Margaret and I rehearsed every possibility as if preparing for a courtroom. She helped me script out possible responses, coached me to feign vulnerability where it would lull them. "If they think they've won, that's when they'll get sloppy," she said, her eyes sharp as needles above her knitting. I laughed, but her wisdom was earned, the type only time and pain can buy. I contacted my bank again, this time requesting alerts on all major transactions. Mr. Holloway was sympathetic. "I'll let you know personally if anything comes across my desk." That small reassurance helped me sleep, for the first time in weeks. Next, I rang Robert's office and insisted on seeing the original deeds to my house and my will. When his secretary hesitated, I pressed, "I want copies tomorrow. And I expect all communication about my estate to run through me from now on." There was a pause, followed by a gruff, "Of course, Mrs. Thompson." Meanwhile, Jake and Emma doubled their efforts. They came by more frequently, bearing food, documents, and empty smiles. Emma would arrive early, shuffling papers in her tote bag. Jake would call in advance, as if to warn me to be on my best behavior. One afternoon, I overheard Jake muttering on the porch, "She's slipping, Em. All we need is one good reason with the doctors, and it's over." Emma replied, "Patience. She'll trip soon." Their presence became a performance. They'd praise each other's patience with me, offer to manage my medications, and insist I nap while they handled all the paperwork. Every act of help was a test. Would I resist? Would I falter? Would I sign? Sometimes my resolve nearly buckled. Late at night, I'd feel the weight of years and ask myself whether fighting was worth the pain. But memories of Harold, of building a home, of dignity in old age, fueled me. I deserved more than their schemes. With Margaret's guidance, we called a trusted old friend, a former bank manager who owed Margaret a favor. He reviewed the last year of my accounts and confirmed my suspicions: forged signatures, unexplained withdrawals, and Emma's name appearing as authorized representative on forms I'd never seen. "You have enough for a case," he said. Armed with this proof, I visited the police for the first time in my life. I felt ridiculous, an old woman with trembling hands explaining betrayal by her own blood. But the officer listened. "Mrs. Thompson, you're not alone. Unfortunately, we see this too often. Keep logs, don't confront them alone, and let us know if they escalate." That night, Margaret and I planned the final act. I'd invite Jake, Emma, and Robert for a family meeting, the kind I hadn't called since Jake was a boy. I'd serve comfort food, act just distracted enough, and let them talk. The evidence would be waiting, quietly stacked in my purse, ready. In the meantime, Emma called with another urgent matter. "Sarah, can we come by? There's some mail for you, bank forms and such. We really should get your signature on some of these before it gets too complicated." I agreed, setting the meeting for Sunday. After hanging up, I texted Margaret, who responded with a single sunflower emoji. Ready. Sunday dawned bright and cold. I spent hours setting the table, baking a casserole, and telling myself to play the part. Memories of happier family gatherings poured in. Harold carving the roast, Jake balancing dinner rolls on his nose, Emma shyly clinking glasses. It hurt in a way sharper than any insult, that I'd have to battle my own kin across a table that once held only love. When they arrived, Emma wasted no time. "I hope you're ready to go through all this," she said, pulling out documents. Jake hugged me, a little too tight, whispering, "Just sign them, Mom, so we can all relax." I played along, feigning confusion, asking questions about every line. Emma grew impatient, jotting little notes on the forms, eyes darting to Jake, who sat rigid, fists clenched on his knees. The meal itself was tense, punctuated by rehearsed reassurances. "You know we love you, right?" Emma said, plastering on a smile. "We're just trying to protect you," Jake added. "This will make everything easier for you." It took every ounce of restraint not to throw the evidence on the table and demand answers. But I waited, as Margaret had urged. After dessert, Emma grew bold. She pushed the main document towards me with a gleam in her eye. "Just here, Sarah. This one finishes everything." I looked at her, letting my hands tremble, pretending to hesitate. "Could someone remind me, what does this one do again?" I asked softly. Jake launched into a rapid-fire explanation, peppered with condescension. Emma seized the pen from my hand, poised to guide me through each line. That's when I stopped her. "Actually, I'd like Robert to explain it to me. He's the expert, after all." Emma froze, but Jake forced a smile. "Of course, Mom. Robert, help her out." Robert cleared his throat and launched into legal jargon meant to muddle more than clarify. But I was prepared. "Do you have the original deed, Robert? I'd feel better seeing it before I sign." Robert faltered. "Well, it's at the office, but I assure you." I cut him off gently. "I insist." The words hung between us as Emma and Jake exchanged looks of alarm. For a moment, the performance teetered. Emma's smile faded for the first time. Jake's leg bounced under the table. Robert coughed, avoiding my gaze. Margaret texted from next door. "Sunflower." It was time. "Excuse me while I get my glasses," I said, standing up. In my bedroom, I checked the evidence one last time. The forged papers, the logs, the recordings on Margaret's flash drive. My hands were steady. I returned to the table, settling myself with deliberate calm. "Before I sign anything, I'd like you all to listen to something," I said, plugging the flash drive into the speaker Jake had bought me last Christmas. Their voices filled the room, conspiratorial, sharp, planning my downfall. The silence that followed was electric. Emma shot to her feet, her voice shrill. "What are you doing, Sarah?" Jake went white, mumbling, "Is that even legal?" Even Robert blanched, his practiced calm slipping away. I faced them, my family, my betrayers, the people I'd trusted with my life. My voice shook, but I spoke clearly. "You tried to take everything from me, my home, my dignity, my future, but you didn't count on me paying attention." Emma attempted to regain composure. "You don't understand, Sarah. We're just protecting you. You're confused." Jake joined in. "You've been forgetful, Mom. We just want to help." But there was desperation in his words now. Panic. I shook my head, trying not to cry. "Protecting me? Or protecting yourselves?" For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. Fear not of discovery, but of losing control. I turned to Robert. "I've sent copies of this evidence to Officer Jennings and to my lawyer. If anyone pressures me again or tampers with my finances, it won't end well." He started to protest, but I cut him off. "We're done here." Jake stood, hands shaking. "Mom, please, don't do this. We're family." It almost broke me, that word, but I held steady. "Family is earned, Jake, not stolen." Emma gathered her things, eyes blazing. "You'll regret this," she spat, but her voice cracked. I replied, voice trembling, "Not as much as I'd regret never standing up for myself." Watching them leave, I felt a strange emptiness, hollow where love had been, but also relief, a sense that I'd survived something far worse than loneliness, the loss of faith in your own. Margaret hugged me when the door closed, whispering, "You did it, Sarah, proud of you." And I knew, in that moment, that no matter what happened next, I'd taken back my life. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. And what happened next would test every ounce of strength I had left. Everything felt different that morning. The calm in the house wasn't peace. It was the hush that comes before a storm. My hands shook as I set the last of the evidence on the table, but my resolve was steady. Margaret wished me luck from the porch before she left for her sisters, squeezing my arm, whispered, "Show them who raised that boy, Sarah." I waited by the window, watching the street, my stomach twisting itself in knots. Jake and Emma arrived right on time. Jake tried his usual small talk, his voice light, too carefully measured, while Emma trailed just behind, carrying her favorite oversized purse. Robert, the lawyer, followed them in and set his briefcase by the door as if he owned the place. They smiled, but their eyes darted around, calculated and hungry. We sat together in my dining room, but it didn't feel much like family. My heart hammered as I poured coffee, hands barely trembling. "Why don't we sit?" I suggested, my voice stronger than I felt. "We need to talk." Jake grinned, acting casual. "Sure, Mom. Always nice to catch up." He tried to make his voice deep and reassuring. I remember when that worked on me. Emma folded her arms. Robert gave a polite, thin-lipped smile that faded as soon as he glanced at the stack of folders by my elbow. I met their eyes in turn, searching for a flicker of regret, a sign of the children, or the friend I once knew. I found nothing but anticipation. "I know what you've been doing," I said softly. "It stops today." The silence was immediate and sharp, filling the room like an unwelcome guest. Emma snorted. "Doing? Sarah, you're confused again." She reached into her purse, fingers brushing a pile of forms. "These are just paperwork. Everything the lawyer explained. You're getting worked up for nothing." I looked at her, forcing myself to smile. "Are you sure? Because this," I tapped the first folder, "is a copy of a transfer you both tried to file at the bank in my name, and the signature isn't mine." Robert adjusted his glasses. "Misunderstandings happen, Mrs. Thompson. Let's just review everything calmly." I slid over the folder with Margaret's transcript and pressed play on the small recorder. Their voices rang out, Jake, cold as a stranger, Emma annoyed, Robert cautious. If she won't sign, push the guardianship. Just get her to the doctor. Emma's voice, sharp as a knife. Move the accounts. Sign the deed after her next pill. Every word was a blow, but I kept looking at them as if I could see them, really see them, for the first time. Jake's face went slack, then angry, then desperate. "Mom, this is crazy," he stammered. "You're paranoid. You've been acting strange, keeping secrets." His voice wobbled, uncertain. Emma slammed her hand down. "Enough of this. If you want to throw everything away, go ahead. See where it gets you." Robert shot her a warning look, but stayed silent. He didn't dare look at me. I took a deep breath, feeling my age and wisdom in equal measure. You all thought I wouldn't notice, that I'd go quietly. But I built this life from nothing. I buried the man I loved. I raised a family. My family. And I won't let you erase me. Jake slumped in his chair, eyes blinking furiously, hands clenching and unclenching. "We just wanted to help, Mom. You forget things, you get confused. What if you lose more money? What if you fall?" I cut him off as gently as I could. Help is one thing. Stealing is another. Emma started tearing up, angry, her words spitting out between sharp breaths. "You think you're so noble? You'd let us watch you waste away, do everything the hard way? Maybe you don't care about your future, but Jake and I—" She stopped herself, realized what she'd confessed. For a moment I felt sorrow so deep it nearly undid me. Not sadness for myself, but for who my son had become, for the love he'd traded for greed. Robert finally spoke. "Sarah, if you intend to level accusations, you should know there could be legal consequences." I held up the second folder, printouts of emails, signed affidavits, voice logs. "I already do. The police have copies of everything, and so does my lawyer. I invited you here not to threaten you, but to say this in person. Whatever happens next is your doing, not mine." The mood in the room fractured. Jake pleading, Emma shouting, Robert trying to wriggle out of blame. Voices overlapped until I raised mine. "What hurts most isn't the money you stole or the lies you told. It's waking up every day and realizing I loved people who were more invested in my death than in my life." Jake burst into tears, maybe for himself. Emma's tears dried to fury. "We did what we had to, Sarah. People like you never appreciate what we give up, taking care of you, watching out for you." I shook my head, the weight of years in my bones. "You did this to yourself, Emma. I never asked for a savior. I asked for a daughter-in-law, a partner for my son. Instead, you both tried to erase me." Robert tried a different tactic, voice silky. "Sarah, I can walk you through a settlement, maybe avoid the courts." I stood, finally, dignity as much armor as age. "Get out," I told them, voice unwavering. "Take your lies and get out of my house." No one moved for a heartbeat. I walked to the door and opened it wide. "Go." They left, one by one, shoulders hunched against defeat and bitterness. I watched as Robert hurried down the walk, as Emma hissed something cruel to Jake and stalked away. Jake lingered, tears streaking his face, his voice small as a boy's. "I'm sorry, Mom. I really am." I believed him, for a heartbeat. I wanted to. But the wound was too deep. When the door closed, the silence was profound. I leaned against the heavy wood, tears hot on my cheeks, not for loss, but for survival. Do you know what it's like to win the battle for your destiny, only to mourn the family you lost along the way? I stood in my quiet house, stronger, lonelier, and freer than I'd been in years. And as I picked up the scattered evidence from my table, I knew justice was coming for all of us. But true peace would take more than just punishment. What would you have done if faced with such betrayal from your own child? Where do you draw the line between love and survival? When the dust finally settled in that empty house, I realized nothing would ever return to the way it was. The air was heavy, the kind that clung to your skin. If you've ever survived a betrayal so deep it echoed in your bones, you'll understand why the next days felt both liberating and excruciating. That first night I barely slept, a mix of relief, adrenaline, and aching loss. My mind replayed every moment at the table, every shocked expression, every awful sentence I'd heard in my own living room. I wandered from room to room, fingers trailing the grooves in the banister, the smell of lemon polish still clinging to the air. This was my fortress now, defended, but scarred. In the weeks that followed, the world buzzed with consequences. The police moved swiftly, thanks to all the records Margaret and I had compiled. Officers came to the house, gentle but determined, asking for copies, reviewing logs and bank statements, listening to hours of conversation I'd never wanted to record. Their sympathy didn't mask their professionalism. One officer, a woman maybe my age, took my hand and whispered, "This takes real courage, Sarah. Most never fight back." A part of me wanted to collapse into her kindness, but a larger part stood straighter. I hadn't survived all this to break down now. Jake and Emma tried everything to avoid the law. First, calls and texts, pleading, insisting it was a misunderstanding, asking for one more chance. Jake's voicemails sounded desperate at first. "Mom, please, we can talk about this. Don't let them ruin our family." I listened to every word, heart hardening. Emma's messages dripped with cold threats. "If you don't drop this, you'll regret it. Think of all you're throwing away." Margaret taught me to log every message and let the police hear the worst ones. Then came the legal process. Court was a foreign world. Gray walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, rows of uncomfortable chairs. My lawyer, Patricia, one of Margaret's friends, sat beside me with a hand on my elbow, guiding me through the maze. I saw Jake sitting across from me, pale, eyes locked on the table. Emma barely looked at me, her jaw set in stone. Robert, for all his bluster, looked the most undone. He sweated through his shirt, eyes darting everywhere but mine. The courtroom itself felt less real than the smallest moments at home, but the consequences it handed down shaped the rest of my life. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails, voice files, forged signatures, the account histories only I could explain. Patricia presented it all, calm and relentless. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman with a shock of gray hair, didn't waste time on pleasantries. "This is a textbook case of elder abuse and financial exploitation," she said. I watched as Jake's face crumpled, the moment his mask finally broke. Emma was stoic through most of it, only flinching when the recordings played her voice, plotting out my inevitable decline and her right to manage my estate. Robert lost control when the forged documents came up under oath. The judge handed down her verdict: full restitution of funds, invalidation of all fraudulent transfers, and, after a second hearing, orders for Jake, Emma, and Robert to keep their distance on pain of arrest. Emma, charged and later convicted, faced community service and probation with the threat of jail if she broke the no-contact order. Jake, devastated and ashamed, was ordered into counseling and financial management classes. Robert lost his license, struck from the bar for his manipulations. Victory should have felt triumphant, but what I mostly felt was hollow. They lost more than money or reputation. They lost my trust, something no judgment could restore. And yet, there was a rising sense of freedom, a reclaiming of the self I'd almost let them erase. Margaret and Patricia fussed over me afterward, coaxing me out to lunch, treating me as a hero even when I barely believed it. "Sarah, you don't have to face it alone," Margaret kept saying. I believed her, finally, for maybe the first time in years. The house was quieter after the court dates, but not empty. Not anymore. Word spread through the community. Some neighbors avoided eye contact at the grocery store, unsure how to speak to the scandal in their midst. Others, mostly women my age, sought me out, confiding their own stories, their own scars. "I never thought it could happen to you," one whispered. "If it could happen to you, maybe I'm not so foolish either." For every sideways glance, there were two new friends, women who came for tea or walks, or who called at dusk just to ask, "How are you, really?" But grief lingered. I saw Jake in every young man mowing the neighbor's lawn, heard Emma's fierce laugh whenever the radio played, sensed Robert's guilt in the dusty old files I now kept locked and safe. Even so, with every passing week, small joys crept in. I started gardening with Margaret, digging into the wet earth, planting daffodils against the coming spring. The physical work was good, honest. It cleaned something inside me that no verdict could reach. One Sunday, Margaret brought over a lemon pie and her granddaughter, Lily, who filled the house with noise and curiosity. I found myself laughing more, noticing the taste of good coffee, letting memories of Harold comfort me instead of ache. Slowly, I allowed the house to feel like home again, not a fortress, but a haven. The final pieces of my life settled into place as the months passed. I joined a book club at the library, became a mentor for a local women's legal aid group, started an online support circle for people facing family betrayal. Sometimes I shared my story in pieces, never the full horror, but enough to show others they had choices. Margaret prodded me into recording a video for a seniors community forum. If you're watching this and you're alone, you're not powerless, you're not crazy. Start with one friend, write things down, trust yourself. My hands trembled the whole time, but when I finished, I felt lighter. I kept some mementos of the past, Harold's reading glasses, an old family photograph Jake once colored on as a toddler. I put away the logs, the files, the ruined birthday cards from the bad years. Some bridges you have to burn, but you can still keep the view. As word got around, families came to me with stories of their own, sometimes asking for help, sometimes just for understanding. Once, a young woman knocked on my door at dusk, eyes rimmed in red. "I heard what you did," she said. "You saved yourself." I welcomed her inside, poured her tea, let my example be comfort when my words failed. We sat in silence, but it wasn't lonely. Emma moved away within weeks of the verdict, taking a job in another state. Jake stayed nearby but only reached out once in a halting letter. "I'm sorry, Mom. I wish I could fix what I broke." I read it many times, searching for my old boy inside the lines, aching for the past, and accepting that forgiveness sometimes comes in seeds, not storms. Robert faded from the town, his old office replaced by a florist. One morning, I passed it and found myself smiling at the display of sunflowers, Margaret's sign, my own symbol. Even now, when the seasons turn or thunder wakes me, I remember those long nights of fear and doubt. But I also remember standing tall against them, finding allies, trusting my own reason when everyone else called me crazy. I learned that dignity isn't given, it's fought for, that love must have boundaries, even in families. If you've never doubted your own strength, let me tell you, it's there, waiting. Sometimes it only emerges when everything else is stripped away. I end my story proud and more whole than I believed possible. If you're watching this, thinking of giving up, don't. Start with small bravery. Write one truth down. Tell one friend. Lock one door. And if you need a reminder, Margaret says sunflowers always turn toward the light. I think I finally do too. Where are you watching from tonight? What battle did you have to fight just to keep your own story? Let me know so we never forget. Justice, dignity, and a second chance at peace belong to all of us. It's strange how peace doesn't return all at once. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, through open windows and half-forgotten smiles. For many months after the trial, I moved carefully through the world, as if I might stumble into another patch of darkness. But little by little, the light stayed. My mornings have their own gentle rhythm now. I wake up and make coffee, letting the smell fill the kitchen, sunlight catching on the windowsill. For the first time in years, I take pleasure in my own company. Sometimes Margaret drops by, her laugh bouncing off the walls, her hands always busy with flowers or cookies for the neighbors. We work in the garden together, kneeling side by side, and take comfort in the steady progress of new green shoots. Sunflowers, of course. They remind me that everything, even after the hardest storms, tries to find its way toward the sun. The house is quieter, but not lonely. I find old joys, reading poetry aloud to myself in the evenings, playing Harold's favorite records while I dust the shelves, repainting the guest room a brilliant yellow. Sometimes Lily, Margaret's granddaughter, comes to draw at the kitchen table, talking about school and friends, her presence proof that innocence survives even the deepest family wounds. Life feels simpler in some ways, and deeper. I shop for groceries in town, stopped to chat with neighbors, and even joined a painting class at the community center. It's humbling, learning something new at 68, but there is a pleasure in every brushstroke, in the freedom to make mistakes that hurt no one. There are moments when grief stirs, sudden and sharp. Passing the bakery where Jake and I used to share Sunday pastries, I sometimes catch my breath. A song on the radio brings back memories of Emma's laughter before everything changed. And sometimes, rare and aching but honest, I wonder what might have been if love had been enough, if greed hadn't hollowed out what we once were. But forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a gift you give for others. It's a gift you give to yourself. I haven't spoken to Jake and Emma since the hearing, except for that trembling letter from Jake. I reread it sometimes, not to torture myself, but to remember the lines between hope and reality. Maybe one day, healing will bridge that gap. For now, I wish him well, as only a mother can. Margaret insists on celebrating every small victory. The day I finally sorted through Harold's old things, the first time I led a session at the legal aid group, even the morning I rescued a stray kitten from under the porch. Joy isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as simple as sitting on the back steps, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, feeling safe in your own home. My story traveled farther than I ever imagined. The online group I started grew quickly, women and men writing in, sharing heartaches and hard-won wisdom. Some sent long letters, some only one line. I believe you. We comforted one another across the miles, a patchwork of solidarity and strength. Rather than hiding my scars, I offered them as proof that survival is a kind of grace. From time to time, I hear about Jake or Emma, pieces of their lives drifting back to me through neighbors or distant relatives. I hope for their sakes they find what they're truly looking for, something more honest than what drove them here. As for me, I am rebuilding. Sometimes it's slow work, like knitting a scarf, one line, one day at a time. But every piece holds warmth. My home is my sanctuary again, filled with laughter and quiet, with memories that hurt less and wisdom that grows more valuable as I grow older. To anyone listening now, wondering if you're strong enough, you are. Even when you feel alone, you carry the courage of all those who have survived betrayal, heartbreak, and uncertainty. Let yourself grieve, but don't let it steal your future. Find your Margarets, find your sunflowers, find your hope. If you've made it this far with me, thank you. You are the reason stories matter. Leave a comment below, share your struggles and joys, and let's remind each other that none of us walks through darkness alone. Life isn't about never falling. It's about always finding the will to rise, and I am rising still.